afternoon, everybody. I'm Peter Lindstrom, and I'll call the Environment Committee to order. First item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Any changes to those items on the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor, or is there a motion?
Motion to
Is there a
approve the
motion? There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's carried. Next item is the approval of the minutes, and I know Commissioner Fredson has some changes he'd like to see.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to have the minutes reflect that I was present at the meeting.
Got it.
Thank you.
Very good. With that amendment, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
The motion has been made, and a second to approve the minutes as amended.
Chair, who seconded that? And who motioned? Thank you.
There we go. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. That takes us on to the business of the day. The first up is the City of Orono. Mr. Kyle Colvin, welcome again to the committee.
Hey, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. The first item on today's action agenda is requesting approval of the City of Orono's comprehensive sewer plan that's contained in the city's 2040 comprehensive plan. The city's comprehensive plan was presented last week at the Community Development Committee. After today's action, the plan will be acted on by the full council at their meeting on May 22nd. At that meeting, the council will take final action on the city's plan to formally approve their wastewater plan and to advise the city to implement the other sections of their overall comprehensive plan. A little bit about Orono. The city of Orono is located in west central Hennepin County, generally located along the northern shores of Lake Minnetonka, and it is within Council District 13. Its wastewater plan is consistent with the growth forecast that the council assigned to the city and reflects, the plan reflects its ability to accommodate that growth through mostly new sewer development. The land use plan guides residential land uses that reflect an overall minimum sewer residential development density of 4.19 units per acre, thus satisfying the minimum 3 units per acre requirements in Thrive for an emerging suburban edge community. A large portion of the city is also designated as rural residential and consists mostly of residential development. It's about a 50-50 split between emerging suburban and rural residential. The plan states that there are currently 1,029 individual subsurface sewer treatment systems, or SSTSs, that provides wastewater services to those properties primarily located in the rural residential area of the community. The city has historically generated excess peak flow discharges to the regional wastewater system, which has resulted in assignments by the council for I&I mitigation work plans to the city. The city's community planning designation, as reflected in Thrive and their 2015 system statement, identifies Orono as an emerging suburban edge community, as I indicated, and a rural residential community. As I stated, emerging suburban edge communities require residential growth, sewer growth to occur at a minimum of 3 units per acre, whereas rural residential densities are 4 units per 10 acres or 2.5 acre lots. These are located in the rural residential areas. And again, the rural residential areas are those areas that are provided wastewater services through the SSTS system. As stated earlier, the city has been identified as a contributor of excess I&I to the regional wastewater system. Since 2011, the city has completed over $500,000 in local I&I mitigation work, with over $130,000 of that work being funded through multiple state bond grants, which the council administered. The majority of that work has been focused on public infrastructure portion of the system, which is a requirement actually, or the bond fundings can only be used for public infrastructure. The city has not taken on much in terms of an actual private property mitigation work in the past, but the plan does identify policies and strategies to investigate I&I mitigation in the private part of the system. The plan the city has and included in the plan is an ordinance that prohibits the connection of foundation drains, drain leaders, and sump pumps to the sanitary collection system, and it also requires the disconnection of such connections if they are discovered. The city's plan conforms to the regional wastewater system plan in that future wastewater service level needs can be accommodated by the regional wastewater system. It's consistent in that it includes policies that supports the regional wastewater policies, and it's compatible with the adjacent communities and other local units of government. It satisfies all of the required plan elements. There is one advisory comment related to the sewer element, which is a standard advisory comment to all plans, and that is that the city is required to submit a copy to the council of the resolution that adopts its plan. So with that, the proposed action before the committee today is that the Metropolitan Council adopt the advisory comments and review record and approve the proposed recommendations of the Environment Committee as written in the business item, which includes the approval of the City of Arnold's comprehensive sewer plan component of the city's 2040 comprehensive plan. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Colvin? Seeing none, you're looking for approval of this
Of the city's sewer element, correct?
sewer element?
Yep.
Is there a motion
Approval.
to approve the sewer element for Arnold? I heard a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Vento. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have a presentation from Mr. Mulcahy. Welcome. About 2019 stormwater management grants.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. I'm here to present business item 2019-110, 2019 stormwater management grants. My name is Joe Mulcahy. I'm in the Water Resources section of Environmental Quality Assurance in Metropolitan Council Environmental Services. So what is stormwater? Basically, it's water from rainfall or snowmelt that runs over the land surface, off roofs, streets, parking lots, lawns, and other land surfaces, and picks up dirt, nutrients, chemicals, and other pollutants and carries them to the nearest water body. Stormwater is also known as non-point source pollution because it comes from a broad area, not one single point like a pipe or a smokestack. Generally, government and especially the Metropolitan Council has done a very good job of treating point sources of water pollution, and a lot of the impairments that are left are still caused by non-point source pollution that is basically largely unregulated from a lot of developments and other land uses. Basically, stormwater is treated with management practices that attempt to collect and treat or detain stormwater before it gets to a water body. In new developments, treatment of stormwater is generally required depending on the area and the land use, the density. But in older developed areas of the metropolitan area, these areas were developed before there were any requirements to treat stormwater. And generally, the only opportunity to treat those areas now is through redevelopment projects. These different management practices use various mechanisms to treat stormwater runoff, including settling, filtration, infiltration, and reuse. And a lot of practices use multiple mechanisms. And a lot of these practices have multiple benefits. For instance, a stormwater pond may settle sediment and dirt, but it also provides some volume control and flood control. A rain garden will infiltrate stormwater, soak it into the ground, and a lot of times nutrients that are carried in the stormwater will be taken up by plants that are in the rain garden and used to basically immobilize that way. So our legislative authority to enter into these type of grants is from Minnesota Statute 473.505, Total Watershed Management. It states the council may enter into agreements with other governmental bodies and agencies and spend funds to implement total watershed management. And in this case, it means identifying and quantifying at a watershed level the sources of pollution, both point and non-point, and means of reducing or alleviating adverse conditions. The purpose of total watershed management is to achieve the best water quality for waters of the state at the lowest total costs. We have had previous stormwater management grant programs. In 2015, we gave out 3 grants totaling $800,000. Those were mainly the results of requests we got as part of an outreach for the Water Resources Policy Plan. We were revising the policy plan in 2015. Those grants proved very popular. So in 2016, we got $1 million to give out grants. The focus of those grants was for innovative projects with multiple benefits that could be replicated throughout the metropolitan area. We had a great deal of demand for those grants, so we continued them in 2017 with another $1 million and awarded 8 more grants. This is a map that shows most of the projects. It's a little hard to understand because some of the projects basically overlap at this scale. For instance, I believe we gave 4 projects to the city of Hugo, so that they're kind of all one on top of each other. But we haven't made a conscious effort to distribute the projects geographically. It's mainly based on the quality of the application. Just for example, a number of those grants, those previous grants, were for stormwater reuse, which is a fairly new concept. Is to collect water off a rooftop or a parking lot, or take water that's already collected in a stormwater pond and use it, say, to irrigate plantings at a development. I'm not going to go into all of these, but I will tell you about a couple of them. The very bottom one there, the fields of Rice Creek in Shoreview. These are 4 high-quality, fast-pitch softball fields that attract athletes from around the country for tournaments during the summer. The city estimates that about 60,000 people visit those fields each summer. In 2016, these fields were the 6th highest user of drinking water in the city. It's mainly used for irrigation because they're on sandy soils and it's high-quality turf for the softball. So basically, this project is retrofitting the existing irrigation system to draw water from a stormwater pond. The city estimates it will save on the average of 6 million gallons of drinking water every year. I'll talk about one more. In 2016, we gave a grant for about $100,000 to Fire Station Number 2 in the city of Eden Prairie. That basically harvests water off a rooftop of the fire station, and it uses the water for irrigation, truck washing, and tanker filling. It saves about 41,000 gallons of municipal drinking water each year. The water goes into a 7,500 gallon storage tank and includes a 1 micron finishing filtration and ultraviolet disinfection before it's used for anything on the street. But these projects have proved very popular just because they basically use the stormwater for a beneficial use, reducing the demand for groundwater or drinking water, and also removing the pollutants that would go to the nearest water body if that water was not captured. This year, we plan to focus on redevelopment projects. Again, redevelopment projects generally are projects that were developed at a time where there were no requirements for stormwater treatment. A lot of times the sites are small, tight, difficult to fit in practices, especially things like ponds and rain gardens, which tend to take up a lot of space. There's $500,000 available in 2019 from council general purpose levy funds. It would have to be used for shovel-ready redevelopment projects. The maximum grant amount would be $100,000, minimum $10,000. Be open to cities, counties, townships, watershed management organizations, watershed districts, and soil and water conservation districts in the 7-county metropolitan area. There would be a $100,000 maximum per applicant. It could not be combined with other council grants. At the council's discretion, we may offer partial funding to proposals or applications. And unless there are extenuating circumstances, projects must be completed by December 31st, 2022. The basic primary criteria that all these applications must meet is it must be for stormwater management on redevelopment projects. And those underlying redevelopment projects must meet this definition from the Minnesota State Stormwater Manual. Construction, alteration, or improvement that disturbs greater than or equal to 5,000 square feet of existing impervious surface performed on sites where the existing land use is commercial, industrial, institutional, or residential. We don't think that's a very high burden to meet, but we do think it will limit it to redevelopment projects. Then we have a number of secondary criteria that are used for ranking. Those are on the second page or the last page of the attachment that was attached to the business item as a table. Basically, the most important of those is the first one. Project exceeds stormwater management standards or requirements. Again, these are difficult sites, and we'd like practices that go beyond what is required by the rules. And we'd also like practices that demonstrate innovative methods that could be used by other entities that are trying to redevelop sites in other parts of the metro area. Again, that's the most important requirement, and it has the highest possible points, 20. All the rest, including effectiveness monitoring, which is rarely done for management practices because it's very expensive and often difficult. If the project drains to impaired water or a priority lake, if it has multiple benefits, such as addressing other issues such as drinking water supply, wastewater issues, groundwater issues. If it seeks to remedy a shortage of housing or create affordable housing, if it occurs in an area of concentrated poverty, or if it clears or redevelops a blighted area. All of these are basically criteria to narrow down the field and recommend what should actually be funded. MCES will strongly encourage any grantees who are awarded a grant to include businesses that participate in the Metropolitan Council Underutilized Business Program, if possible. In the proposed process is that all metro area cities, counties, townships, watershed management organizations, watershed districts, and soil and water conservation districts will be notified of the availability of funding via GovDelivery. We'll allow a 6-week application period. A panel of council staff and American Public Works Association member will evaluate, rank the proposals, and make a recommendation for review by ES management for funding. That recommendation will then come to this committee and then the full council for approval, and then we will award the grants. The next steps is this business item will go to the full council on May 22nd, next Wednesday. These dates are tentative, but we're currently looking at the application period opening June 3rd, 2019, closing on July 15th, and notifying the applicants of the grant awards by August 31st. Those dates may slip a little depending on what happens, but that's our general schedule at this point. And so we're asking the committee to approve this business item and forward it to the whole council for their approval for the grant process described in the attachment and authorization for staff to advertise the availability of grant funding and solicit applications for the grants. And if you have any questions, I will now attempt to answer.
Mm-hmm. Questions for Mr. Mulcahy? I have a question.
Sure.
$500,000 this year. That looks like it's decreased from previous years, if memory serves. Was that a council obviously the council approves the budget, which um, sets these numbers, but could you go into that a little bit? Why a lower amount?
Mr. Chair, I believe that was because we've had previous years of grant funding, and the council doesn't want to make this a continuous program. They'd rather make it for innovative and sort of one-time demonstration type projects. Again, this is just for redevelopment projects, so that's why we are continuing it, but they decided we should continue it at a lower amount, which is reasonable to us, I guess.
Very good. Councilmember Fredson.
Thank you, Chair. On slide 14, so in a previous slide, it referenced the counties and the townships, and then this just says the metro cities and WMOs, WDs, and SWCDs will be notified.
Right.
So is that, are they purposely left out, or?
They aren't purposely left out. It was just a matter of space, basically, but we will notify
Okay.
all cities, counties, townships, watershed management organizations, districts.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up on the question about the funding. The Dayton Council made a effort to, well, let me back up. Under the Pawlenty Council, a lot of the regional administration costs were paid for with the general fund. Some of it was passed on to the different divisions as part of their budgets, but much of it was paid for by the general fund. Then under the Dayton administration, the council switched to passing on almost all of the regional administration costs to the different divisions, which freed up some general fund money for targeted initiatives such as this one. Obviously, there's been a lot of competition for those different targeted initiatives, including 2.9 million last year to prop up the Section 8 vouchers for the areas that we administer vouchers for. So it's kind of a dance between the different divisions, and the regional administrator recommends how that should be parceled out, and then the full council either agrees with that or changes it to something else. So that's how that worked out in terms of funding. We have a lot of pressures on our general fund, and it's a very small fund, a little over $15 million. Doesn't go up very much every year, and as a portion of our entire budget, it's a ridiculously small number spread out over the entire metro area. But our council will again have to have a conversation as we're going through our budget process for next year of what we want to do with that money.
Very helpful. Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Mulcahy? And so we are looking for a motion to move forward on this grant program.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the grant program as stated.
And is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. Looks like a great program.
Yeah.
Thank you
Sure,
very
there'll
much.
be a lot of interest in it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And that takes us to our information items. The first one is budget. Mr. Smith, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Budget concepts, rates, and workshops. We've got a couple of them coming up.
We do, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with the council committee. My name is Ned Smith. I am the Director of Finance and Revenue for Environmental Services. I've got two info items. The first one is going to be on the budget concepts, rates, and workshops. And what this is an opportunity to first share the preliminary or the proposed budget that the division has put together over the last couple months. And then the second part is to walk through kind of our sharing plan. So how do we get this out to the customers? How do we make sure they're informed and they're aware? How do we keep and how do we hear their concerns and get their input? And then walk through kind of what the long range plan is for the rest of the year for getting these implemented. So cut straight to the chase. flashing lights. The proposed sources and rates, first and foremost, is our wastewater charge is up 3.6% over 2019. Sewer availability charge will be flat, and that is flat since 2014, and all of these we'll get into a little more detail. This industrial strength charge is going to go up 4.9%. Strength is the additional strength that, or additional, we'll just call it strength, that the industrial customers send to us.
Oxygen
beyond
demand and total suspended solids, is it not?
Yes. Beyond what comes from a domestic flow, basically. It's whatever's additional to that. And then the industrial permitting fee usually moves about lockstep with our overall wastewater charge change. Overall, if you look at the expenses, you're up 1.9% over 2019. However, if you back out the inflow and infiltration pass-through grants, we're actually up about 4.8%. And we will walk through how we got to those numbers. Most important thing to know for our 2020 proposed revenue sources, you can see the majority of our revenue is from the municipal wastewater charge at 76%. Sewer availability charge is still pretty significant at 16%, and then industrial waste at 5%, and other is at 3%. It's important to remember that we are a fee-for-service agency. If you flush, you pay. You don't flush, you don't pay. We are not a tax. We do not receive any federal, state, or council money. We are strictly based on our wastewater fees from our customer communities, customer cities, as well as industrial waste customers. And then on the flip side, there's no MCES dollars are used for any other council expenses by statute. So we can't take SAC to build a light rail station. But again, as you can see, the majority of our money is coming from our MWCs. In terms of uses by category, this is where it'd be helpful to grab that handout because that use by category looks a lot like the sources by category. So if you can take a look at your handout, please. And you'll see that our largest expense, and this is available on the table for anyone in the audience. Our largest fee is our largest use is our debt service. That's basically our mortgage payment. It's usually around I think it's 139 million for this year, so it's a big chunk. Then the second biggest is our salaries and benefits at 23%, and then beyond that, it kind of all drops off. Consulting and contractual. So that is for things if we contract work out, like for our electrical PMs. If we have consultants coming in to help us optimize our systems, that would be in there. And then rent and utilities. Rent is some of it rent is what we pay, but most of that is what we pay back to interdivisional, like rent for this building. We do pay rent back to regional administrator. And then utilities, that's where our gas and our electric components are. And then interdivisional services or central services, those are all of the centralized services we receive from regional administration. So these are things like HR, legal, accounts payable, other finance support, and Office of Equal Opportunity, learning and development. So those, the centralized services that we receive from RA. And then material supplies and chemicals, those are could be as simple as office supplies, but materials also includes things we use for processing at the wastewater treatment plants, as well as chemicals, things like alum or I'm drawing blank.
Polymers.
That is the exact one I was thinking. Yes, polymers, because we had great polymer savings last year. And then PAYGO is pay as you go, and we'll walk through that a little bit more in detail. And then other is other central miscellaneous funds. And again, we'll walk through these in more detail right here. So this helps to provide some an overview of kind of how the dollars trend over time, over the years. Again, you can see that our MWC is up 3.6%. It's important to call out here that even though our municipal wastewater charge, that's the wholesale charge that we charge to our communities, only went up 3.6%, no city will see a 3.6% increase. Exactly. Some will see higher, some will see lower. And that's because we use, as we've discussed earlier, the allocation method, where we look at last year's flows. So in this case, we're looking at 2018 flows. And we say if a given city is 10% of the 2018 flows, then we will charge them 10% of the 2020 municipal wastewater charge across the region. So in this case, that would be 235.6 million. So if someone was 10%, they would get a bill for 23.56 million. So the three things that can change what a city pays, the first is our MWC across the region. Does that go up or down 3.6? But the two that actually cause the swings, first is their own flow. And the two largest influencers of flow is growth or water conservation. So how much do the people that are there use, or are there additional customers? And then inflow and infiltration. And so that can go both ways. If you are what we call a wet city, where your soils absorb the water and the water gets therefore into the pipes, then a heavy rain year would cause your flow to go up. But the flip side is, if you're in what we call a dry community, there are some communities where heavy rain doesn't influence their I&I as much, because not as much water seeps in and gets into the pipes. So I&I is really a big lever in determining whether your flows go up or down, in addition to just the general growth or decline of the region, of the city. And then the other is the total flow across the entire region. So we're at about 90 billion. Our flow went down for 2018, even though we had some pretty heavy rains in there, not as heavy as now. But our total flow did go down. So even if your flow as a city stayed flat, but the total region goes down, then your percent would actually go up, the percent of your allocation, and that would cause your rates to go up, therefore more than 3.6%. We love this, and our cities mostly love it. We love it because it helps with our AAA bond rating, because it means we have very low volatility in our revenues. And it means that we know exactly how much money we're going to collect each month. The cities appreciate that for the most part as well, because we can tell them in May what their 2020 monthly bill is going to be. And we might have a couple of tweaks between now and when we finalize the rates in July, either because of more data comes in, or we receive feedback from the Environment Committee or from our customers that might tweak some of those numbers. But generally, within about 98%, the numbers are accurate. So cities can start building their budgets now. We used to not release this until August, and that was very hard for our cities, because most of them build their budgets in June or July, some as early as May. And I said most like it. What they don't like is the volatility for some of the smaller cities, and particularly smaller cities with a lot of I&I, or who have no I&I, but the overall region changes. So they can get some pretty big swings, 10, 15, even a 20% increase. But whenever I get those phone calls, the first thing I do is look at their 5-year history, because if you went up 20%, you probably went down 10 to 20% 2 to 3 or 4 years ago. And so if you look at it out over the long run, you find it averages out, and everybody's generally about at a 3 to 5% increase over time. We have asked our customers if they would like us to take out some of that volatility, and most of them prefer we don't. They prefer to manage their reserves themselves, because what they do is, when the rates go up, they raise their rates. When their rates drop, they hold their rates flat. And so they're able to build up a cushion so that they can work through the next volatility. And they also use that then for their capital programs. So important to know, as much as I like to pat myself and pat the team on the back for a 3.6% increase, nobody actually sees that. The next number is your industrial charges. You can see those are going up a little bit. That's mostly driven, again, by the increase in strength charge, as well as some of the trends we're seeing in overall strength and industrial demand, which is somewhat flat. And then we have our transfer from our SAC fund. It's important to note here, 48.2. So the transfer is to pay for the SAC portion of our debt. You may recall from our finance overview, we talked about how if you think about a pipe that's 60% full, the municipal wastewater charges pay for the full portion of the debt, so 60% of the debt charges, but then the SAC pays for the empty portion of the pipe for the debt for that, which is 40, it's closer to 30%. So that is baked in there. And we've also, our SAC reserve is in a comfortable position. You'll see that in a couple of slides. And we're going to use some of that reserve towards PAYGO, to we're going to keep our pay-go flat. We'll talk through that. But we want to use some of our SAC reserve to cover those expenses as a way to basically provide rate relief. The other key is down in other sources. You'll see some pretty big swings there, and that's driven mostly, that's where our pass-through grants are. So as grants come and go throughout the years, when they go away, it looks like our revenue drops 35%, but it really hasn't. That's mostly because of pass-through grants. In terms of operating budget, the most important thing to note here is although it says 1.9% over last year, if we back out the pass-through grants in 2018, we're actually up about 4.8%. But that's driven by three main drivers. Our debt service went up $9 million. And we'll talk in a little bit about where we're going to get some relief for that. But for now, that's a pretty big increase. Our labor went up about 2.2 million, and we'll walk through what's driving that. And then utilities went up 2.2 million. That's mostly driven because that is not driven by use in terms of kilowatt hours. That's mostly driven because the rates are going up per kilowatt, and it's primarily in electricity. Our is growing at about 3% per year, so we're seeing that. In terms of doing a deep dive on our labor budget, of course, the first thing to point out is we are at about 667 regular FTEs, full-time equivalents. If you include overtime, then that gets up to 696. We do purposely plan in a vacancy factor, so we do have retirements. We do have very low turnover. Actually, our retirements are slowing down. But to account for the time it takes for us to backfill those retirements, we put in a vacancy factor, which is basically, it's, as a finance guy, it gives me hives, but we plan a negative expense in labor. And so that's how we make sure that we don't have a massive underrun in our expenses, because we do know that we're not going to backfill those retirees and people overnight. So those seats do sit empty, so we try to accommodate for that. There's generally two things that are driving the increase in 2020. Headcount has been flat for the last several years in terms of FTEs, in terms of actual people. The increases in the last couple of years has been through FTEs, which is primarily through overtime. So the 18 and 19 years were primarily overtime. In 2019, we are actually increasing our headcount by about 2% in terms of the number of people. That's first and foremost driven by Rogers. So we are acquiring a Rogers plant by 2020, and we will need to staff that plant with employees of MCES. Actually, we have offered the current staff that work there now, they have an option to come to us, and we're waiting to see how that turns out. If they choose not to join us, then we will need to either move some of our folks over there and backfill. But we will be adding headcount around operations and maintenance. And then, so if you notice, the last 2 years went up because of overtime. So we're going to try to manage that with some planner schedulers, about 3. And the idea is those planner schedulers will help us to staff to the work, not to the shifts. So right now, if someone is sick, and we just cover that shift, and not entirely, these are blanket statements, but where we want to get to is we look at the work that needs to be done. So if someone is not here, maybe we don't need to cover that shift, and we can transfer that work to someone else. So that should cause, so basically those positions should pay for themselves. But the number one thing we like to point out is, yes, we are at about in the 600s for people. But if you look back in the 90s, we were closer to 1,200. So we've almost cut in half the staff that we use to manage our plants. Most of that is around efficiencies, automation, SCADA, electronics, things that we can use to automate and manage remotely. And some of it is just in working better and smarter. And we continue to look for those opportunities. For debt service, as I mentioned before, it is going up $9 million from 2019 to 2020. And we also have PAYGO. So PAYGO is pay as you go. It's using operating funds to pay for, instead of financing. So we have a capital program. Rather than going out and borrowing money to pay for that capital program, we use operating funds for PAYGO. So it reduces our debt. We save about $300,000 over a 20-year bond. when we use PAYGO. So there is some interest savings there. Biggest risk factors is if we had a dramatic change, and so we do not plan for anticipated regulatory changes. We only plan for known regulatory changes. So if there was a considerable regulatory change and the only way to meet that requirement was through an increased capital program, that would increase our debt. And then we do have some interest rates. There's no volatility in terms of the outstanding debt we have right now. We use 20-year fixed rate. So whatever rates we have from now back to 1999, those are set. But in the future, if there's interest volatility, that could increase our cost of borrow. We did hit on PAYGO, so we've been working generally trying to get this to increase in the mid-teens. Interest rates were so low, it didn't really make sense to aggressively pursue it. So we kind of just ramped it up generally and would hold it steady for a couple of years. We are facing that $9 million debt service increase is pretty crushing when you can only a 3.6% increase in MWCs only increases your revenue by about 11 million. So 9 million's already spoken for, and then you had 2 to 3 million from increased labor. We're out of money. So we're going to hold PAYGO flat for 2020, and in fact, that's where we also are talking about using some of our SAC reserve fund to cover some of that PAYGO expense.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Please.
can you explain a little bit more about that? Will somebody be keeping track of that, and then that gets paid back later at some point? Because I know prior to the crash, we had a significant SAC reserve balance, and we didn't want it to get over 100 million because we were afraid that people would get eyes for that and want to take it away from us. And we ended up needing every penny of that and then some when the crash happened. If it weren't for the ability to get the legislature to intervene on our behalf, we would have gone negative in our SAC fund from 100 million to negative, because that's how bad the crash was. So it's getting back up healthy again, but so then there's that same temptation. You've got this big reserve, you need to spend it on something else. So hiding it in the PAYGO sounds like a really good idea. I just wanted to know how that's going to work.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Wolf. Yes, so I would point out that when we did, I've just skipped ahead for those who want to see if the butler did it. In the 2001, 2002, we did $12 million per year for 3 years. So we took out 36 million to use for PAYGO. At this point, we're using 3.5-ish. And we may need to use that for 2021 and 2022, still at that lower rate. The other thing we have to do with tracking that, though, is we have to make sure we keep track now for the next 20 years of all of the money that we used SAC reserve, because what we do is we take the annual debt service and say it's for this year it's 100, call it 140 million for easy math, and then we figure out, well, what percent is empty and what percent is full, and that's how we figure out what percent SAC pays for versus what percent the MWC pays for. Well, if your debt service was reduced by 3.5 million because you used your SAC reserve, if you ignore that, you're going to be double billing SAC, because you're going to be making it pay for all of the debt service when the debt service is actually lower. So you're not giving SAC the credit for using pay-as-you-go when we took out the reserve. So we will be tracking all of our projects, which we track them anyway over 20 years. So we will need to be making sure that we're backing out that benefit every year as we continue to use those funds. And yes, so if we stay, right now we're running about 20 or 30,000, excuse me. Right now we're running about 20 to 22,000 units per year for SAC units. If we stay at 18,000 per year, then the next time we would have to raise the SAC rates is 2035. And we actually are concerned that's not practical. And we don't think it's a good experience for a business owner. Because what you have is someone who opened a pizza shop in 2013, SAC might have been 10% of their expenses. But if we hold SAC flat for the next 20 years, then someone who opens a pizza shop in 2035, SAC will only be 5% of their opening expenses. And that might not seem fair to the guy that opened in 2013. So we need to think about what are the implications of a flat SAC rate. But now, 18,000 per year, you can see our units. We've been in the last 20 years, we've been above 18,000 probably 15 of those years. So 18,000 is not unreasonable, but we do have to keep an eye on the fact that it can drop. As you can see in 2009, it did indeed drop down to 6,000. You can also see what that did to our reserve. So the blue line is our SAC reserve fund. The orange line is our council policy minimum balance. And that policy minimum balance is basically 5 years. It's the 5-year average of your projected SAC. So for 2018, that was about 46 million. 2019, about 46 million. So we're still well above, and that line is not going to grow. It'll stay on about that trajectory. It levels off at about 50 million, actually. So as long as we stay above 50 million and we don't spend 12 million per year from the SAC reserve, I think it will stay at 2 to 3 to 5, depending on how some other expenses come out. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Thank you. If you go back to the number of SAC unit one, I would point out also that prior to 2001, it was pretty stable up in those higher numbers. That valley was a new thing for us. And I was on the council in 2009, 10, 11, and we were worried that the numbers were never, ever going to go back up in the 20s ever again. At that point, that's how grim the economy
Looks pretty dire. Mm-hmm.
Part of my job description is prayer. So I do want to talk then a little bit about our outstanding wastewater debt. The good news is we peaked in 2018 at about 1.3 million, and now it's going to be leveling out, holding steady at about more in the 1.2 range, billion, sorry. And then one other thing I just want to remind, so we have two primary forms of debt. The first is AAA. We use bonding, so general obligation guaranteed by our revenues, but backed up with the general obligation of the council. That is AAA rated. That gives us about 3.25% interest rate was what our last offering was back in 2018. We actually we're not going to do one in 2019 because we have enough cash to keep us through 2019, but we probably will again in 2020. But again, AAA rated gets us about 3.25% for 20 years. And that is generally about 60 to 70% of our debt service comes from AAA rating from our bond. And then we also use PFA, which is the Public Facilities Authority, which is a state agency, but they administer the SRFs, which is the State Revolving Fund. And those are subsidy dollars that come from the federal government to lower the interest rate. So we get about 1.75% from PFA, and that is worth about 30 to 40% of our debt. So again, 20-year fixed. So we are peaking in terms of the total debt outstanding in 2018, but we still have a little bit of what we call a debt service bubble. That's driving about a $7 to $10 million expense increase each year, but that debt service is going to peak in 2023.
What's the interest rate on the PFA?
PFA is 1.75%.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
it's about 150 basis point subsidy. And then we'll level off in 2022 to 2023, actually decline for a few years until the mid to late 20s, and then they'll start creeping up about 1 to 2 million a year. Most of this debt bubble was driven by the crisis back in 2009 and 2010. One of the things we did to offer rate relief was we pushed our principal payments out. So our debt is not quite like yours and my mortgage, where it's fixed every year with a bond or a PFA, I'm not sure about PFA, but with a bond, you can choose how much principal you want to pay in any given year. You just have to make sure to meet your coupon, your interest rate obligations. So they pushed some of that principal out into the future, and now it's coming due. But fortunately, we're still riding one of the largest expansions in the history of the economy. And so we're still able to kind of get it by, but again, it's a little tight because that is still consuming most of our rate increase. So debt bubble ends in 2023. In terms of debt per capita, though, so 1.3 billion, that's a lot. But we're actually in pretty good shape relative to our peers. Every 3 years, the National Association of Clean Water Agencies NACWA, does a survey on all types of things that are included in running a wastewater treatment plant, wastewater treatment utility, including your outstanding debt. So our debt per capita, we're at about $448 per person. Per capita at least, and that puts us in the lower quartile. It's primarily because we don't have a consent decree. A consent decree is when the EPA comes in and mandates that a utility invest a certain amount of dollars to mitigate a problem. Most of those problems are because most cities have combined sewer and stormwater into one collection system. Ours are separated. And so when they're combined and there's a heavy rain event, the plants get overflowed, over capacity, and they just open a gate and they let sewage go out into Lake Erie or the Puget Sound. Actually, Puget Sound, they didn't mean to do that. It happened, but not on purpose. And so if you are doing combined service, that's called a combined sewers overflow. And if you're doing those, then the EPA will step in and mandate it that you build a solution. Usually that solution is underground tanks. I visited one in Providence, Rhode Island. It was 26 feet across and 3 miles long, 500 feet below the ground. So you just build a giant underwater holding tank. The storm water comes in and collects, and then as the plant settles back down, you start pumping it back up and you treat that. Again, we are fortunate that our city partners separated their systems back in the 70s and 80s, and so we don't face that dilemma. So we don't have EPA consent decrees. Just looking at this list here, I know Cincinnati, Washington, D.C., Cleveland, and Atlanta all have consent decrees. And they're usually anywhere from $3 billion to $15 billion over 10 to 20 years that they have to invest. So that can drive up your debt significantly. We talked about most of SAC. I just want to emphasize again, because of the great units that we're seeing, we're going to be able to keep our SAC rate flat for the 7th year in a row. So we haven't raised SAC rates since January 1 of 2014. It does look like we had a slight dip in 2018, but I would not call that an indicator in any way. We need to remember that 2017 was 22% over 2016. But if we draw a trend line, we're still healthy, and we still were able to add to our reserve about another 10 million. And at this rate, we are planning to add to our reserve a little bit more in 2019 as well. So we think we're pretty healthy in SAC. The other thing to remember, we never stop beating this drum. You thought I was going to say horse. Is that we do have outstanding competitiveness in our retail rates. So every 2 years, we, MCES, do a survey of our retail customers. And we ask them, what do you charge for 5,000 gallons a month at the retail rate? So this includes whatever the cities charge for their pipes as well. And we are 40% less than our peers being 100 million gallons a day. And so we are 40% cheaper than the national average. And that's as of that same NACWA survey. And this is a new survey, and it still is the same story. So we're excited about that. We also try to keep an eye on what our peers are doing from their rate charges. You can see there was in the early teens, the NACWA was pretty high and we were pretty low. And we did a little flip-flop there in 16 and 17, but now we're bringing ours back down in line with what the national average is. And the reason we're bringing those back in line is because we have made a 5-year commitment from 2018 to 2022 to our customers to keep our regional rate increase at 4% or less. And this was made on the prior council, so we want to make sure that this meets your expectations as well for customer service. I'll actually my next presentation is on customer service, and I'll walk through how we got to that 4%. But you can see we're on 2020 will be year 3 of that 5-year promise. And after that, we will work to keep it at our inflation rate or lower. Industrial rates generally move lockstep with our MWCs. However, we do back out the parts that don't apply. So a strength charge is due to the fact that it costs more to treat industrial waste at a plant than it does to treat domestic waste. But we back out the interceptor charges from that because it costs the same for strong as it does for weak waste to go through our pipes. So there is no incremental cost for transporting the industrial waste. So we do not charge any incremental fee for that. This is based strictly on what's charged at the plants. So that causes it to go up a little bit. And then we're also working on phasing, and we're also working on phasing in the debt service portion. So we did an audit of how we were charging strength charges, and we weren't charging them for the debt. We were only charging for the operating expense. So we are phasing that in. We have 1 more year after 2020 to complete that phase in, and then strength charges should move pretty close lockstep. The rest of those are where they're. Permit fee moves directly with MWC, so that's at 3.6. And then I love telling the story. General permit fee is flat because if we change the rates, it would cost us more to change the web and print out new postcards than any incremental revenue we would collect. So we just leave it flat. The way that we share this out, so we have already previewed these proposed rates with our industrial customers in March and April. We met separately with the liquid waste haulers. Those are they drive the tankers that go straight to our plants and dump things in. And then the industrial waste customers are the ones that send it down the wastewater, the sewers. We met with both of, it's large enough we can't fit them all in one room, so we break that into 2 sessions. So we reviewed our charges, proposed changes with them. Those meetings went really well. Actually, that should say May 14th, because that's today. Here we are for the Environment Committee Direction for Public Meetings. And then we have 2 meetings coming up, May 23rd out at the Minnetonka Community Center in the morning, and June 6th in the afternoon at the League of Minnesota Cities. And we highly encourage our council members to join us. We have great donuts and cookies. And also fascinating interactions. The other thing is it's really turning into an interesting event. It's our open house and budget workshop. We have up to about 10 tables that are staffed with subject matter experts from around the utility on topics such as I&I, SAC, industrial waste, the capital program, our MWCs. Actually where cities can come and get detailed explanation from our alarm and metering folks for how do we measure what's included, what's not. And then the water resources staff, water supply, and our interceptors, just to name a few. So people can come and they learn a lot about how the system works and what resources are available. On July 9th, we also do a survey after that. So on July 9th, we'll come back. We'll share with you what our customers have shared with us, what concerns we heard, if there's any changes that we made to the budget based on either additional information or from what we heard from our customers, we'll share that with you. And at that time, we will formally propose our budget, formally propose our rates. The Environment Committee, if it is approved, we will then forward that on for July 24th to be approved by the overall council. Again, that's approving the rates, the 3.6% increase in the industrial. And then that gets baked into the total operating budget across the entire council, and that gets presented on August 21st. And there's the waiting period, and then it's final approval in December. So with that, I will stand for any questions about our budget.
Any further questions for Mr. Smith? Council member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank Mr. Smith for an excellent presentation, as always. And in full disclosure, he and I have been doing meetings together and giving presentations together for a really long time. And when I forget words, he gives them to me too. So it's not a one-way deal.
That's why you're so knowledgeable on all these different things too. Forces you to be knowledgeable when you're standing in front of 50 people and trying to explain something. I think I attended down at the Metro plant, I believe it was, maybe Empire, maybe a year or two ago. It was a tour, but you also gave a presentation. Was that one of the customer forums? And I'm wondering, because I found it really helpful to get the broad overview. and then combine it with the tour. And I like the League of Minnesota Cities, and I'm sure the Minnetonka Community Center is very convenient for people in that part of the metro. But I like the idea of combining this forum, or at least an explanation,
Yes.
with a tour of the plant itself.
Yes. So, Mr. Chair, there are, as part of the customer forums, the open houses, we also invite them to come and see this year's Metro and is it Blue Lake?
Blue Lake.
Okay. So we invite them out in August, to come and see the plants. And we, uh, because I'm so talkative, we can't fit my presentation plus a plant tour. And so the plant tour is really focused more on the plant.
Great.
Although Dave Simons over at Blue Lake and it's usually Mike at Metro do a great job of kind of weaving in what they've seen in the budget from the capital program and from an operating perspective, so people can see, all right, I understand that budget, I went 3.6, but what is that really buying me? And they can see the equipment, see how the choices that we're making are keeping their costs low and keeping us efficient. So those are plant tours. Those will be in August. You'll get a separate invitation, and we love for council members to come to that as well.
It's fascinating. It's great. And I think we're going to even hear a little bit more about that here shortly.
Yes.
Thank you,
Councilmember
Mr.
Wolf.
Chair. Just to follow up with that too, with the customer forums, we don't necessarily know who's going to show up. But for the plant tours, we need to know ahead of time who's going to show up for security reasons. So that's a big reason why the forums aren't held at the facilities, is for security reasons.
Makes sense.
Very true.
Good. Any other questions? So are you looking for some action tonight, or this is just information?
Tonight is an information.
Just informational. Perfect. All right, and guess who's up next?
Next. We will wait for so I'm still Ned Smith. I'm still the Director of Finance and Revenue for Environmental Services. Janine Clancy, the Assistant General Manager of Technical Services, cannot join me today. She had an eye issue, and so she did not want to spread her eye issue to anyone else. So I'm going to cover for both of us, but we are the executive sponsors of the customer service team. We're co-executive sponsors, so hopefully I can speak as knowledgeably as she can. So the purpose, what we want to do today is, so we have done a customer satisfaction survey all throughout last year, particularly the last half of the year, and we want to share out with you today the results and our next steps. So we're going to walk through the background and methodology, kind of how did we approach it. Our three customers that we reached out to was the communities of the cities, our industrial waste customers, and then our water resources customers. And then we'll talk through next steps. So just for a background, it's important to understand what's really been driving all this is our customer level of service. So this is a document, we created this about 3 or 4 years ago. And it started with, we were pretty sure we were doing a good job. We were certainly meeting all of our compliance, and therefore we thought we're doing a pretty good job of meeting our customer demands as well. But we thought, wouldn't it be nice if we asked them? And we thought we were delivering a good value, but do we know what our customers value? And so we dedicated some time at some previous open houses, the budget workshops, to actually break down into small groups and work with the customer communities to ask them what's important to you. What do you want to know? What are the services that we provide that you value the most? And what do you expect from us for what you're paying us? And those, they came up with, it was divided into 3 categories: financial, health, safety, and the environment, and customer service. And so the financial piece and some of the customer service as well, that's kind of what drove, when we talked about that 4%, you can see a couple of highlights here: charges and fees. So charges and fees should be predictable, justifiable, and provide good value for the region. Optimize the budget plan. So make sure that your 5-year budget plan is optimized. O&M programs meet customer service goals. Well, we need to define those goals. And then preserve our assets. So we could drop our rates to zero and we could invest nothing in our capital program and we'd save you lots of money, but that wouldn't preserve our assets and that would cost us longer in the long run. And so our customers said, no, I want you to preserve your assets. And which, by the way, preserving assets means we don't leak into Lake Minnetonka either. And then be fair and transparent. So we reach out to our customers, make sure that they're pleased with what we're delivering. So these were things, and retain the AAA bond rating because that keeps our debt service low, which just keeps our rates lower for our customers. So these were the things that helped us to figure out we need to keep our rate increase at 4% or less. Most cities are on very tight budgets, and they're in the 2 to 3% range as well for their overall operating increases. We need to match that. Health, safety, and environment is around permits minimizing impact, so make sure that we are conveying and treating it safely with minimal backup spills and traffic impacts. I have to point out, when we go to conferences, there are some utilities that they have a goal of treating 97% of their wastewater, and they're happy when they meet it. We treat 100% of our wastewater, and that's somewhat unique, which again, we're fortunate because we have separated systems. And then lead by example, so make sure that you're doing what you can for environmental sustainability, including conservation. And then around customer service, be a good neighbor. So this particularly is around odors, but also how do we manage our capital program. So this drove a lot of the great work that Janine has been doing with outreach in her technical services team to make sure that people are aware and informed and our partners before we go out and dig up a road. That can be very disruptive. Make sure that we're working with the cities to minimize the disruption. Meet our capacity needs, which is make sure that we have a system that can support the growth for the region. Generally, we're built out through 2040. We've baked in all the growth expectations through 2040, and our system is ready to meet that. And then communicate and communicate information. Make sure that we're talking to our customers, telling what's going on, both with their projects as well as the financial and the budgets. Engaging them, making sure we're partnering and collaborating so that we are getting their input, not just making decisions and presenting them and then thinking we're done. It's really good to ask people what they think before you make a decision. And so these are all things that have been guiding what we've been trying to do. As a result of that, we formed a customer service team, which was a cross-functional team across ES that would implement these things and figure out ways that we could make this kind of come to life. And one of the things that we identified was that we would do a survey about every 3 to 5 years. And so we started last year. So once we decided to do a survey, we wanted to understand what are our communities, industrial waste and resource customers, what are their perceptions of us? What do we think we're doing well? How satisfied are they? And then what are the areas where we have room for improvement? Once we have that survey, which we do, address the identified issues, get that feedback back to our customers, not only how did you rate us, but what are we going to do with it? Strengthen our customer relationships, and then that'll be a baseline for future satisfaction surveys. So we think we're going to do this about every 3 to 5 years. I keep saying 3 to 5 because we're a little slow. This is our first one, so we need to get the process up and running, and once that's up and running, then we'll be ready to work on a more regular schedule. So the methodology was, first we did hire a third-party expert on customer surveys. One, because they're better at it than us, and two, because that increases the objectivity of the overview. And so we baked it. We broke it down into two components. One was qualitative, and one was quantitative. So for the qualitative, these were more topical, and these were more two-way interviews where the survey company called 15 customers, 7 communities, 5 industrial waste, and 3 water resources, and kind of talk through, these are the issues that we want to learn, so what is the best question that we could ask to figure that out? So we kind of got their input to help us write the survey. Then we went out and did, the survey company did quantitative interviews, where we reached out, and I'll show you the numbers, but large numbers, to go through a standard set of questions to understand how our communities, again, these are our wholesale customers, our industrial waste, and our water resources, perceive their services. So we did it from October through November. We called 82 communities that we had 82 community surveys that represented 73 different communities out of 110 served. So some of our larger customers, we would interview more than one. We might do the finance director and the public works director, or the city administrator, and the city community development director. So we would have more than one from some of our larger customers. We did 270 industrial waste customers and 35 water resources. So these were 15 from city staffs, from cities, as well as 20 representatives from watershed districts or organizations. So overall survey results, we were generally pleased with what we heard. 70% are satisfied of our cities are satisfied or very satisfied. 70% of the respondents satisfied or very satisfied with the work in the region. 88% of our industrial waste customers were satisfied with the work that we're doing, or very satisfied, and then 72% for our city customers. We're very satisfied. I think we need to break that out into communities versus water resources, but overall in the 70 to 80% range. But when we look at 70%, the finance pessimist is quick to point out that's 30% that weren't delighted. And so we want to figure out how do we fix that. Within the cities, our retail customers, some of our strongest areas or areas of strengths, they were very pleased with our project coordination around our capital program and our communication. So the outreach beforehand, as well as when we're doing the work and then the closeout. Our customers are satisfied with the communication they receive around the sewer availability charge. So the SAC team goes out and does public outreach on a regular basis to teach city staff and also the development community and small business associations. What is SAC? How does it work? They were pleased with that. And then our municipal wastewater charges, that's primarily around the work we do for our budget workshops. And then there was high satisfaction with our interagency and city coordination, as well as awareness and responsiveness. So this is, are we partnering with our other stakeholders in the region to make sure that we're getting to optimal solutions? And then our top 10 large customers and our larger communities were more likely to agree that work well with a partner. And we generally found that is true. Our larger customers were more happy with the work that we do. And that's because our larger customers, we work with them more because there's more issues that we encounter with them. But overall, 69% of our communities agree or strongly agree that our services are priced fairly. So we're 40% cheaper than the rest of the nation, and so that's reflected there. In terms of our community improvement areas, we want to continue our effort on intergovernmental coordination with our stakeholders, comprehensive plan feedback. So this is around what Kyle just presented for you, making sure that our lines of communication are open there. Raise the level of communications on MCS services. So what we found was it's not that they're necessarily looking for more or better services, but they're looking for better access to what we're doing or better awareness and communication around those services. And then increased opportunities for improved outreach and collaboration on water supply activities around the water supply plans. For industrial waste, overall, some of this was really shocking, really. The majority are very satisfied with our staff's knowledge and responsiveness and availability to answer questions. They're very satisfied with our monitoring technicians' professionalism, helpfulness, and knowledge. And this is the one that really blew me away. I'm going to read it straight. A majority of IW customers with an enforcement action in the last 5 years are very satisfied with the enforcement action staff's respectfulness. So that meant somebody was coming out to your business to tell you you're in violation of your permit, and if you don't fix it, you're going to get shut down. A majority of people that it happened to said, that was a really good experience. Which, just think about that. So what we find, they're very satisfied with the communication. Our industrial waste model is a high-touch model. So every single business has a permit engineer that's assigned to them and is frequently communicating with them. In fact, so the amount of communication that an industrial waste customer gets is most of the times higher than what our communities receive. And so one of the things we're thinking about is where else can we lever that high-touch model. In terms of industrial waste areas for improvement, most of this was around better awareness of what industrial waste offers. So there's an industrial waste website that has all kinds of resources around best management practices. We have a newsletter that tells people what's going on a quarterly basis. And then we have online reporting, and we have tools that are around training and around tracking. All of those are out there, but what our customers were saying is, tell us more, help us understand it better, help us get better access to it. So we want to work on that. And then there was also a strong interest in reports that recap the results of inspections. So after you come out and do an inspection, let us know what happened. Our water resources, similar story here. The services that are offered are good. We want to make sure that customers are aware of them. Overall, they were happy with the strong relationships that they have with our water resources staff. They recognize the importance of our water quality monitoring activities, and they use it regularly as either for their only or as a supplement for their own source of water quality data in their cities. And then water resources customers consider regional water quality data reports and trends assessments as highly valued service. So they appreciate the knowledge that they're getting from us around water quality and trend assessments.
A
Yes.
question for Councilmember Bento.
Mr. Chair. Ned, do you have any sense that the Flint water issue and other issues similar that have occurred around the country have increased the appreciation of Twin Cityans as it relates to water quality? Is there anything that shows a correlation there? It's a bizarre question, but it hit me that.
I think that Flint was about their drinking water.
Right.
And Flint was about not paying attention to what you put in your pipes.
Right.
And so I think it helped. I think a lot of people the problem is we don't do drinking water.
Right. I'm just thinking of what we take for granted in the context of it in terms of public utilities. I should have said that first.
I think that we are working hard to tell a good water story here in the Twin Cities. And when you look at our compliance and you look at our rivers and you look at what an important part of our lifestyle that is, I know that MCS has been working to tell the story of One Water and how the work that we are doing is helping to preserve the quality of the lakes and rivers.
Right.
And I think it also has helped to see that when you think regionally, you get good outcomes. And when you take care of your system. So I think it helped us from a capital perspective because before Flint, when someone said, take care of your pipes, I don't know that people understood how important that is. And now when we say, now for us, it would be a different outcome.
Right.
But I do think, I would agree with that. But I'm not as close to it as Sam Paskey and even Janine when she goes out for her capital programs.
Great question. Thank you. Other questions?
I just wanted to follow up on that, Mr. Chair. I don't think most people have any comprehension of the mastery of water chemistry somebody has to have to run a municipal water system. I know when Lakeville had about 35,000 people, we put in a water treatment facility. I was on the city council at the time. And it was a lot of work to get it just right because you had years and years of magnesium and iron building up in the pipes. And then when they put this clean water through, the water that was coming out the other end was blue because it was cleaning the pipes. And so they had to tweak the chemistry so that you'd have clean water coming through, but you wouldn't take anything off the pipes on the way as you do it. And I think that was kind of part of the problem in Flint, that they didn't look at that end chemistry stuff carefully enough. But most people have no clue how complex the water industry actually is.
Good point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for water resources, our improvement areas, we want to work with our partners on the water resources policy plan, look at ways that we can increase our collaboration with input meetings and other permanent groups that can help us to collaborate. consider investigating emerging, I'm going to have to read this one directly. Consider investigating emerging contaminants as a part of water quality assessment. So this one's tricky. Right now, state agencies like MDH and PCA, the Department of Health and PCA own this. They are the ones that look at um, emerging contaminants. And so we have historically not had a role in the past, but we would like to explore and investigate partnering with our state and regional stakeholders for options. For are there things we could do here? Some of these are very expensive to monitor. Um, and so there's a cost component that we need to take into account. But what we really need to take into account is making sure that we're collaborating and we are respecting the roles and responsibilities that each agency and each city has in there, and not steamroller over that. We want to be conveners more so than anything else. And then continue to provide or expand regional water quality and quantity database support for sharing. So this is a similar message of we have a lot of really valuable information. What are ways we can get that out to the public? So one of the things, we have the customer portal that's coming out. We're looking at ways that we can get some of this information out on the portal so that customers have access to the water quality and other data that we have. And we have data going back, I'm going to say at least from the 70s. It may be earlier. And so it's really valuable that there's a lot of things that we can show that are trends that can help people understand the state of water quality in the region. So next steps, develop a work plan to address our improvement areas. So now that we know where we need to get better, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? And it'll start with the customer service team, but we will partner with other parts of the utility as well. And then provide the results to the customer groups. So we are going to share a lot of these results at the customer forums in May and June, so people can see that. And then again, perform a survey again in 3 to 4 years. And with that, I will stand for any additional questions.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yeah, council member.
Oh, thank you, Chair and Mr. Smith. I just was going to maybe add more comments and questions, but just a little bit. But it seems like when I see the angst out there, it's like maybe from a business customer. I talked to like a realtor who was trying to have a beauty shop sold, and then they put another sink in, charge goes up, and sometimes the response, getting back to them when they're waiting for someone buying the business and that. So I'm just thinking if it could be more user friendly, either there's an actual, they know the information up front where they could do, or we get back to them quicker, I think would help some of the, that type of customer feedback.
Yeah, some of the feedback I've heard as mayor was from businesses where they felt like they were misclassified, like Met Council thought that they were, or was charging them as a manufacturer, but they were actually a retail business or something along those lines.
So, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, that's something that we're always working on because SAC awareness is not where we'd like it to be. I would offer that anyone can send an email to SAC program and ask how many SAC units. So if they're thinking of acquiring a building, they can find out how many SAC units are on record. The problem is, and you're exactly right, it's the smaller businesses, they don't know to ask. So the big developers, they know, and they'll call it that they'll call us all the time. How many are at this? How many are at this strip mall? How many are? So we get those a lot, and of course, and we'll turn it around in 5 minutes. We'll look it up and send it right back out. We don't put that into a queue. But what we do is therefore try to increase our education efforts. And so that's when we do go out and talk to small business associations. We are always talking to city staff to help them understand what resources are out there. We would love to get that to an online state, but our database itself is not clean enough that we would feel comfortable putting that out. So we're working on that. In fact, right now we had a person who wrote determinations who wanted to kind of slow into retirement, and so she spent 2 years scanning our old files so that we can get all the stuff from the 70s and the 80s online. But now we have to clean up that database and make sure that it's accurate. But ideally, at some point, we would see that online, and we would also even see an automatic processing of your SAC applications.
Yeah.
That's a ways off, though.
Okay.
I hope you're still on the council when that comes.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a whole bunch of sewer connections that happened before 1973 or whatever the year was. Then all of this came online. I know, like at Rice Creek Commons, with the Army hookups back in the 60s and the 50s.
We're working with them quite a bit.
I can imagine. Yeah. Other questions? Fantastic information. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And that takes us to Deborah Manning. Welcome to the committee. You're going to be talking to us about the Southeast Metro Water Reclamation Facility update.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Deborah Manning, and I am the Assistant Manager in Plant Engineering and Technical Services. And my co-presenter, Janine Clancy, can't be here to present, so I will be doing it. The Southeast Metro Water Reclamation Facility project would provide reclaimed water to a potential waste to biofuel facility proposed by Enerchem, and it has been delayed due to one of Enerchem's major investors withdrawing from the project. And this presentation will cover MCS's project and Enerchem's delay. To put this all in context, the wastewater reuse policy is laid out in the Thrive MSP 2040 plan, which states that the council's role in wastewater reuse is to pursue reuse where economically feasible as a means to promote sustainable water resources. The Water Resources Policy Plan emphasizes that the council's reuse efforts should be accomplished by working closely with our customers, by maximizing regional benefits from regional investments, and while providing high-quality, sustainable wastewater services. In May 2018, the Council amended the Water Resources Policy Plan to include the potential for a regional investment in wastewater reuse projects that benefit the region based on certain defined criteria. MCS's reuse initiative is moving ahead in alignment with the direction set in these policy documents. A major part of that initiative is this proposed Southeast Metro Water Reclamation Facility. Reclaimed water is wastewater treatment plant effluent that has received additional treatment to make it suitable for specific reuse applications. The council's proposed Southeast Metro facility would divert from the Empire Wastewater Treatment Plant's effluent pipe, which is the green line shown on that figure, divert about 2 million gallons a day of treated wastewater. Those facilities would treat the effluent to a higher level needed for reuse purposes and then pump and pipe the reclaimed water to Enerchem's proposed waste to biofuels facility in Amber Grove Heights. Staff have been from MCS and Enerchem have worked together over the last few years to develop the wastewater reuse concept. Enerchem submitted a letter of interest in reclaimed water service in March 2017. Council authorized staff to negotiate a memorandum of understanding and design deposit agreement with Enerchem in February 2018. And in 2018, council staff developed the facility plan for the Southeast Metro Water Reclamation Facility, and the council adopted that plan in June of 2018. The MPCA gave preliminary approval to that plan in September 2018. Last December, the council authorized staff to execute a memorandum of understanding and a preliminary design deposit agreement with Enerchem and a grant agreement with the MPCA. At that point, the next step would be Enerchem signing that memorandum of understanding and the design deposit agreement. That didn't happen at the end of 2018. In April of this year, Enerchem informed MCS that its waste to biofuels project was delayed due to the withdrawal of a key investor. Enercom stated that they are working to identify another funder or funders. It's important to put the Enercom project or proposed project in a larger context. The Ramsey Washington County Recycling and Energy Board selected Enercom as the sole firm with whom to negotiate a contract to develop a facility to gasify the board's refuse-derived fuel. So the first milestone in that would require Enercom's facility to be online by 2023. So this is a significant project driver for Enercom. Enercom describes its proposed waste to fuel to biofuels project as shown on this slide. The project is actually a partnership between Enercom, which is a Canadian firm, and SKB Environmental, which is a local waste management company. They expect their facility to be a $200 million investment this is Enercom's waste to biofuels facility. 200,000 square feet of building space, 400,000 tons per year of municipal solid waste to be gasified and turned into 20 million gallons per year of ethanol. The facility would create 104 direct jobs and would need 1.6 million gallons a day of water for cooling and processing. When Enercom was looking at water supply, they considered groundwater and reclaimed water. A preliminary contact, this is what they've described to us. Their preliminary contact with the Department of Natural Resources indicated that the permitting process for groundwater, a groundwater appropriation of this size, would be complex and lengthy. And so they came to us talking about reclaimed water service. We've been evaluating the potential for wastewater reuse in the Empire Treatment Plant service area for some time and considered reclaimed water service to Enercom feasible. So that's when we moved ahead with developing concepts and costs. So this is the same slide showing the concept for treatment that we came up with and some of the costs. The Southeast Metro facility would be located at the site of the former Rosemont Wastewater Treatment Plant. We've decommissioned that treatment plant but still own the site. And it is located right on the outfall or effluent pipe from the Empire Treatment Plant. Again, we would divert wastewater from the Empire plant, treat it to that higher level using filtration and disinfection, pump the reclaimed water about 5 miles to Enercom's proposed facility. The capital cost estimate is $27.7 million. This is for our MCS's treatment facilities. And the O&M cost is estimated at $300,000 per year. The debt service and O&M estimate would be $2 million per year. Our previous schedule, which now does not reflect Enercom's schedule delay, was about a 3-year time frame. We had the following phases: preliminary design and detailed design this year in 2019, construction bid and award early in 2020, construction from May 2020 through October 2021, and commissioning and startup the end of 2021. The funding arrangement was shown on this slide. The council policy states that the reclaimed water user must pay for the cost of reclaimed water. Therefore, the approach to paying is laid out here, where Enercom would pay a design deposit for preliminary and detailed design. They would pay that upfront before we did any of the preliminary and detailed design work. Construction, startup, and commissioning and ongoing operations and maintenance would be paid by Enercom via annual debt service and O&M payments, regardless of the amount of reclaimed water used. When Enercom came to us in April, they informed our staff that one of its major investors in its project had withdrawn, citing the carbon intensity of Minnesota's electrical grid and challenges with that investor being able to market in California the ethanol that Enerchem would produce. This investor, according to Enerchem, continues to invest in other Enerchem projects. The decision to withdraw was not based on concerns about the technical concept or about Enerchem's performance capabilities. Enerchem couldn't estimate the duration of the scheduled delay. However, they did say that it had taken a year to work out the previous funder relationship. Enerchem's project, we believe, continues to have a number of factors that contribute to its feasibility. As I mentioned, Ramsey-Washington County Recycling and Energy Board has committed to begin negotiations on a contract with Enerchem to gasify its refuse-derived fuel, and they have a set time frame for when that needs to happen. MPCA prioritizes alternatives such as waste biofuels over landfill disposal, so there's an incentive there. Dakota County's solid waste master plan, their staff see Enerchem's project as a way to meet their solid waste master plan goals. And then the Enerchem project would likely meet Minnesota State Statute 41A.16, the Advanced Biofuels Production Incentive. That incentive requires that production be in Minnesota and that production begin by June 30th, 2025. It does provide incentives that we believe would apply, and Enerchem believes would apply to their project. And finally, the city of Inver Grove Heights supports locating the potential project in their community. Mr. Chair, with that, I conclude my presentation and would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on this project? Councilmember Stern.
All right, thank you, Chair. I just had a question, a couple, but what are they planning on burning in the, what kind of waste, I guess, is what we're looking at?
Mr. Chair, council members, their plan is to take municipal solid waste and gasify it, and that ties in with, in general, but with the Ramsey-Washington County's refuse-derived fuel, and gasifying that.
Okay, so, Chair, all right, that includes anything from plastics to paper to medical waste, et cetera?
Mr. Chair, our understanding is that there would be a recycling element to this separation of solid waste types of material, which is one of the reasons SKB Environmental is partnering in the project and interested from that point of view. But beyond that, we don't know exactly how, what components are separated and how. That's part of their processing process.
Well, one more. Okay, thank you, Chair. The last one is, what kind of, for the air pollution, what kind of scrubbers or filters they have on that? Is it similar to Herc and Hennepin, better than the Hennepin County burner, or less, or what are we looking at in that?
Mr. Chair and council members, we would like to have more of that information, but Enerchem has not moved to a permitting stage yet and developed that information. We know that they've been working with MPCA air pollution staff, but we do not have, and they have not submitted to MPCA or others, any of that technical information that we're aware of.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions? So right now the project's on hold until they get another financer or the financer that they had comes back online, but probably another financer.
Mr. Chair, we believe it would likely be another investor due to the previous investor's interest in selling ethanol in California. And yes, they're pursuing other investors, and we don't know who or how long that would take.
Very good. All right. Well, we may have you back at some point to hear that it's moving full steam ahead.
I hope so. Thank you.
As do I. Thank you very much. Well, General Manager's report, and you may notice that the role of Lisa Thompson tonight is played by Mike Marinas, so take it away.
Mr. Chair and council members, I've really got two brief updates on two different subjects. There was some discussion about tours, upcoming tours. So there's a tour coming up on June 4th. The chair has been invited to down at the Metro plant, and I'm told that committee members, council members will get some information tomorrow or invitations to that tour. So that's the afternoon of June 4th. So please try to make that. And then Ned Smith talked about our customer budget forms and associated tours. So I checked the dates. There is a tour on August 5th at the Metro plant. I forget if it's morning or afternoon at this point. And then August 16th at our Blue Lake plant out in Shakopee. So stay tuned, get more information on that. We'd love to have you. We love to show off our facilities. My staff is quite proud of what we do, and you know, we can talk about them in presentations all we want, but really seeing them in person really drives home the complexity of these plants. The last item I wanted to give you an update on is the last time you saw me was the end of March, and I was presenting a business item on an emergency declaration for flood mitigation activities. At that point in time, the rivers were rising. We weren't sure what level they were going to rise to. I talked about 4 different plants of our 8 plants were at risk. The Mississippi actually rose to the 7th highest level in recent history and had some impacts for our plants. The Metro plant, and I think in my presentation, the river got high enough that it flooded out the entrance road to the Metro plant, Childs Road. So we had to build a temporary ramp up to a higher, it's basically the pipe that brings the flow into the plant. The top of it's like a single lane road. We built the temporary ramp up to there, and then employees could get in and out of the plant. As an employee, we were riding on top of what we call the barrel for about 8 or 9 days. The river subsided. We got Childs Road back, so the employees are now able to enter the plant in a normal fashion. The other big impact for the Metro plant is with the raised river level, we have to lift the treated effluent, the treated wastewater out of the plant up to this raised river level. And we do that with large pumps. We have all the equipment for that. But now, since really it's been late March, we've been operating these large pumps, which means some extra electrical costs for us, some extra power costs. And because of our reliance on the reliability of those pumps, we keep some extra staff, primarily electricians, around 24/7, so that if there's some issues with the Xcel energy that's coming into the plant, we have backup generators in place, but we want those electricians present so they can do the switch over to the backup power very quickly. So we've been incurring some extra costs for those electricians to work those extra hours for us. As far as the other plants, sitting here today, they're all back to normal. Really not doing anything at this point to mitigate the flood because, again, the river's dropping down. I'd say the Metro plant's the only one that has some impact, and it's this extra pumping. Looking at the river forecast, my guess is that we'll continue to run these large pumps for maybe another 10 days or so. We were on the path down to getting off of these pumps, and then all that heavy rain last week brought the river back up or held it level at a high enough level that, like I say, we'll continue to run the pumps for a while. So I'd be glad to entertain any questions about tours or floods.
Thank you. Just had a question on the tours, and that is that ever open to anybody else? Like sometimes every once in a while you get the constituents that say, oh, they'd like to take a tour, or is that be set up separately from when we have our tours?
Mr. Chair, council members, and we have a how shall I say it, a robust tour program at many of our plants. If you come into the external council website, there's a direction to putting in requests for tours.
Okay.
And we'll field those requests, and again, we can do them at many of our facilities. So we get lots of college groups, high school groups, et cetera, and average citizens and you
Boy
name it.
Scouts,
Boy
Girl
Scout, yeah,
Scouts.
we've had Boy Scouts. I do a lot of the tours, so I've interfaced with them. If your question is that for these tours where we're having the chair and yourselves or the budget forms, if the average citizen's at a budget forum, I'm sure they'd be invited then.
Okay.
But there's opportunities for the average citizen to get to our plants, and if you're talking to some of your constituents, I encourage you to have them reach out to us. Be glad to show them around.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And with that,
Wait, can I just have
Yeah,
one
of
other?
course.
Okay, I was asleep at the wheel when we approved the minutes from last time, and I was there at the meeting too. It shows me not there, but I missed the one before the flat tire, but I definitely was there last meeting talking about polymers too. So I just don't know if we didn't make a formal motion to get it amended. I know I missed that time already, so.
do we need to make a formal motion to amend the minutes, or can we do it next time, or we can do it right now?
We can do it right now.
Is that a motion that I heard
Yes,
you
yes,
make
please.
right
Second.
there? And it's been seconded to amend the minutes.
We should-
All in favor, say yes.
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 Aye.
Opposed, say
I
nay.
don't say yes.
Aye.
See, yeah.
Affirmative. Opposed, say no. Okay, carries.
All right, we need a motion.
Thank you, and we are adjourned.
Sure, you can